Hey, before we jump in, if you like what you hear on the podcast, check out our free Substack newsletter, The Sober Friends Dispatch. It's a weekly dose of real talk, stories from the sober life, and a little extra support between episodes. Go to soberfriendspod.substack.com and subscribe. That's soberfriendspod.substack.com. All right, let's get into the show. Welcome to the Sober Friends Podcast. My name is Matt J. Over there is Steve, co-hosting with me. And it gets weird when you start feeling like you have to explain to normal people. What the hell is normal? Normal people who don't have a problem with alcohol that you do, or you feel that urge that you need to explain something about you not drinking. So what the hell do you do in that case? This is one of those that I see on TikTok and Instagram all the time in those sober places. I don't know what to say. They're going to ask me. So what do you think? How do we explain this one? Or maybe, Steve, you start with, what was your original experience, especially when you first got sober?
Good morning, Matt.
Morning.
Yeah, when we just sort of touched on this topic, I said I still feel uncomfortable at times, depending on who I'm talking to. And not as bad as it used to be, but uncomfortable at times, really talking about being an alcoholic, because I still think that people don't completely understand what that. I shouldn't say people. No. Some people just don't completely understand what that means. So we all have that different idea of what that is in our head. I certainly have it. Growing up in a home of an alcoholic, my mom was. So I sort of had that thing in my head of what an alcoholic looked like. And although that's changed a lot, as have I since I've come in the rooms, I still, like I said, can feel uncomfortable about, how it is. I don't know. Like my next door neighbor right next to me is somebody who I have a good relationship with. They've known from the beginning, since I moved in here, which was 20 years ago, that I didn't drink, right? It was one of these things where we were doing some stuff outside. I was helping my neighbor, and he had a wheelbarrow, and he comes over. This is when we first met. I first moved in, like we were just getting friendly, and he's got two cold beers in the wheelbarrow. Oh. And I still remember that day that I had to say, oh, no, I don't drink. And at that time, I was very uncomfortable. I was not going to tell him I was an alcoholic. I was just going to tell him I don't drink. So it's always been a little tricky for me. Again, over the years, it's gotten less tricky. I don't have a problem telling anybody today. I also don't want to burden. I don't shout it. I don't shout, hey, I'm an alcoholic, I'm in recovery. So it's still a little touchy for me, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
I think it's a little touchy for everyone. For especially new people, this is one that is especially hard. You think that you're going to look like a freak if you tell them you don't drink. I tell some people and I don't tell others. Right. For me, I think this is a feeling out sort of thing. And this is really awkward because the world is full of social drinkers. Events are full of social drinking. And then there are the whole thing, if I explain, am I going to over-explain it?
Right.
Is that going to be nerve-wracking? What are they going to think of me? I think this is something that our audience deals with all the time. And I think something that might help a little bit is there is this thought that no drinking is normal. I'm on TikTok a lot, looking at a lot of doctors. Flipping through, there's a couple of doctors that I really like. And when they talk about heart disease and that type of stuff, they talk about avoid alcohol. It's not good for you. Yep. So that makes it a little bit easier. We went on as a quick aside tying this in, we went on a college visit this weekend up to Springfield College. And after I was told after the fact, yeah, it's an athletic college. People all look like athletes there. And they didn't talk a lot about the big drinking parties. I didn't get the vibe that that's a thing. One of the places we went to, they had an on-campus bar, which shocked me. But my son has never had any booze at all, as far as I know. And he's told me he's been around it. And he just says no. So that changes a little bit. But, then there are the adults who like to booze. So there are all different type of events and strategies. I think the biggest one is the barbecue at friends. What do you do there? Especially if you haven't had the conversation.
Yeah, it's always a little tricky. Like I said, for me, I'm just thinking as we do this live. We do this with not a lot of input sometimes, and or pre-thought. And I just think about a newer couple. And I've talked about there's a someone down the street. They moved in. I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Probably not even that long. Maybe 4 years ago. And this guy loves to drink. I've talked about, I don't know if I've ever talked to him without smelling alcohol on his breath, no matter what time of day it is. And he's really nice, and that's fine. Again, that's fine. And there's another couple that moved across the street from them around the same time, maybe a little bit before. And those two guys, I see them all the time doing what I used to do. Like, they're really good friends and neighbors. And this is what I try to do, right? I try not to vilify drinking, right? Number one. And I see these guys, they both work, they come home, in the summertime, you'll see them hanging outside by the pickup truck. They both have a beer in their hand or something. And several times early on, I would walk by them while they were, not just them, but this person in particular, maybe some other people. He had some friends over and they were having, he's like, hey, you want a drink? You want a beer? And I would just say, no, thanks. And then I would say, I think at one point I finally said, no, I don't drink. So he would stop asking me. And I always wonder, maybe I should explain to him why I don't drink, right? Not because I want to help, nothing to do with his drinking. Only because I wonder if that makes it even more weird. Why doesn't Steve drink? I think the first thing is probably, you thought, okay, he had a problem with it, whatever. But I wonder, should I just say, listen, I'm in recovery, it's fine, but then I also, like you said, I feel like I got to over-explain myself. Hey, I don't care that you drink, I got to feel like, that's why I think it's still a little bit uncomfortable for me. I don't want them to feel uncomfortable drinking.
Right.
That's right. So then I feel like I have to say, oh, you guys do whatever you want, but I can't drink because I have a problem with it. So for me, in my head, again, maybe I'm overcomplicating it. It seems weird either way, right? It seems weird either way, that I explain it or I don't explain it. If I don't explain it, it's out there of why or what's going on, and maybe it's none of their business, right? That's true. And if I do explain it, then do they get weird because, here comes Steve, the alcoholic, on the street, although there's several of us on the street. And maybe we shouldn't drink around him. Right? It's just weird.
Yep. I think the thing to avoid is the TED Talk. There's no reason to give the TED Talk to everybody, even if you feel like you should. I think that is the urge of everyone, especially early on.
Yeah. I agree.
Really keeping it simple. They're the easy outs. Yeah, not tonight. I'm good with the soda. I'm good with the seltzer. But really, it's a lot of, I'm good. Nah, I don't drink. And there's a lot of people who don't drink for any number of reasons.
Yeah, much easier now than it used to be, right? To say that.
So there's that. Then there's the professional setting. That gets dicey because, before the pandemic, there's happy hours, networking events. There's still networking events. And those can get really alcohol drenched. I can remember going to one rather early on when I was sober, and it was after an all hands meeting, and it was at a place that had an attached bar, and I walked in to say hi to a couple people, And I was out real quickly. I didn't even give people a chance to ask. I knew I couldn't be there.
Right.
And that's when I started actually calling people because it was really uncomfortable. I didn't have the desire to drink. I didn't know what to do. I was in a situation where people are drinking. It's a networking event, and I feel like I should still be there. But it was way too uncomfortable, and I erred on the side of getting the hell out. So there was no conversation. But that can be one where there is more of a back and forth.
Yeah, it's something you just touched on there. It's somewhat, to me, dependent upon how often you're going to see these people, how often you're going to interact with these people, right? Mm-hmm. If you're at a function where you can just say, oh, no, not tonight, not today. You're at a backyard barbecue where maybe you don't know everybody. Like, no, some guys, whatever, some people are urging you to have something to drink. That's sort of easy. You can push it off for that day. And I was thinking about in the context of this neighbor, like I said, I walk the dog all the time, and we're walking, and they have 2 dogs, and sometimes, and this is the other thing, sometimes I'll stop and the dogs will be playing in the front yard, and that's when, in the past he would offer me a drink or something. He's like, hey, there's something in the cooler if you want one. So then it becomes like, if I have to interact with that person often, I don't want to just say, no, not today. Eventually I have to say, no, I don't drink, so they stop asking, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what I said. My first reply almost always is no thanks, I'm all set, right? And then, again, depending on how much I interact with these people, it may be, no, I don't drink. Now, you come back to my neighbor, my closest neighbor, right next door. Now, I have told them that I'm in recovery, and they know. Matter of fact, I think I've told the story on this before. The guy next door's name is Mike. His last name starts with a V. I had a good friend in the program, Mike, whose last name started with a V. So I started a group text of alcoholic friends, but put my neighbor in the text instead of the other guy. Yeah. And so I'm texting all these guys, and we're doing alcoholic talk. And then finally he reached out to me, and he goes, hey, Steve, I think you got the wrong Mike. Right? And I think this was before I completely outed myself to him. So it was pretty obvious to him at that point, oh, Steve's in recovery. But they know. And so it all depends on the people, all depends on how I'm going to interact with them, how often, and all depends on what type of relationship I want to have with that person, right? Do I want it? Do I want to be close? Do I really care about it enough to really get that intimate? Because this is intimate information that we're talking about, right? I mean, like I said, not everybody needs to know. It's very interesting because you said, oh, you don't have to be a TED Talk. I absolutely, one of my character defects is I have a problem with oversharing, right? And I mean that. Like I will share stuff with people that's probably not necessary, and maybe more like, and I don't have a problem with like medical stuff that's going on. I don't know. I just don't have a problem with that. I know some people do. Yep. But like, especially with my wife's issues, like I, do some volunteer. Like I tell people what's going on. I tell people, like, yeah, she can't even use the bathroom. She's using a commode. Like, I understand that some people may be uncomfortable with that, but I like to give people like, hey, this is what life is like, I mean, this is what happens sometimes. And I've been trying to dial that back, and I think I've done a pretty good job over the last few years. But I can have a tendency to do that, to want to give that TED Talk first time in and try to over-explain things.
Yeah, I can identify with that feeling. And I think it is about feeling things out. That sometimes it can build a connection with somebody else when you do share something intimate. And I think it's all about how. How do you do it? Yep. Who do you do it with? When is it appropriate? And when is it not? And I think that's the harder one with the people you're around most of the time. I think the work colleague also falls under the neighbor. This is the group of people you see every day, have conversations with every day, And that's the one where it feels weird. For me, I think the weird thing with the work people is they in the past have seen me drink.
Right.
So I've gone from drinking with them
Right.
to then not drinking. And that is probably one that feels more weird to me than it does to them. Because the reality, this is kind of skipping to the end of the story. Most people don't care. And when I say they don't care about you. They care about themselves. I shouldn't have said they don't care about you. I'm sure they do. But they care about themselves more, and they're not really listening, and it's not, for most people, they hear it and they move on, depending on how it comes up.
Yeah, it's one of the things we hear in the rooms, and I heard it somewhere else outside the room, and I don't know exactly what the quote was, what the context was, but it was basically that nobody thinks about you more than you think about you.
Yes.
Right? And I think we all struggle with that. Like we think, and cause I've even said that to my wife. She was talking about something, and I'm like, you really think that these people think a lot about you, right? This person, like, let me tell you, they're not thinking about you as much as you think they're thinking about you. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a big key, right? We think that, and again, and I'm guilty of this. Trust me. Like, this is me struggling with this too. Oh, I'm going to say something to somebody, and they're going to remember it for the rest of their lives. For instance, the first time my neighbor came over with the 2 bears in the wheelbarrow, I bet you he has no recollection of that. Mm-hmm. Right? It was just a natural thing to do. Whatever. I mean, maybe he does, but it's a very vivid memory in my mind because basically because I was uncomfortable, right? I was put on the spot. And at that time, I wasn't working a program. Like, I was not drinking, but I wasn't working a program or anything. And I just felt like, oh, this is a new neighbor, blah, blah, blah. And so I guarantee you, like, he doesn't, if I mentioned it to him, he probably doesn't even recall it. And I think that's one of the critical things we have to understand is people, they do care about us, of course, especially people you work with or people you know. They care about us, but they don't think about us on a regular basis, right? People are busy. We were talking, before we got on, you were saying about hiking, and you're like, I don't know how you guys find the time. I'm like, well, it's different for us, right? Like you have a busy life. You get off this podcast and you go on. You have to do your editing and all that, but then you go on with your life, right? You got college visitations to do. You got kids' schedules to do. You have work to do. You have, literally grocery shopping to do. All those things that it doesn't give you time to really spend a lot of time dwelling about other people.
Yeah. I've got a soccer game a little bit later today, the third soccer game of the weekend. So everything is sort of planned out, and I have other things to do, and that reinforces the point that people don't even remember those little things. I'm sure your neighbor oftentimes, as a friendly thing, brings a beer out to people.
Yeah,
that's just a normal thing, mm-hmm. And people, like my father-in-law, he never seems to remember. He has very often put a beer up to my lips.
Right.
He's done that a number of times, and it's easy for me to get offended because this is a family member. I'm like, how can you not remember this stuff?
Right. But
he doesn't, because he is only thinking about his own thing, and they don't see it every day. It's not that. That's the other thing is they don't see the bad. You remember the bad times,
right?
When drinking is a problem. They don't see the bad times, so they're not taken aback of, ooh, what am I getting involved with giving this guy a beer?
Right.
They only see you at your best.
Right, and that's a great point. Right. Most don't see that. Right. So most of your people, your neighbors, some will obviously, depending on if they're family members, how close they are, but most people don't. They have no clue. They have no clue the risk of you having that up drink, right? That's what it is. Like, we're aware of the risk, right, of us having a drink or being tempted to have a drink. Most people they have no clue, right? And again, even this person down the street, who I tell you all the time, like he just seems to drink. Listen, again, I have no judgment, and I mean this honestly. I have no judgment except that maybe he drinks and drives. I don't know. I don't even know about that. But yes, and they both get up. They go to work every day. They keep a house, right? They seem like really good neighbors. They've been helpful to me when I broke my foot and I couldn't walk the dog. They would stop up and take the dog for a walk with me. Like really good neighbors. So there's no judgment on that at all by me. It's just like they don't know. Like I said, they don't know. They don't know how much one drink could lead to a ruining of my life, which is really what it comes down to for me. And that's why we're so, that's why we pull back, we pull away from it so dramatically at times.
Yeah, this is the same reason I say no to cupcakes if it's somewhere, or donuts.
Right.
I can have as many. I'm as capable of having one drink as I am having one donut.
Yeah, me too.
So I just say no. Now I have had a handful of instances where someone has questioned it. Well, why aren't you drinking? I don't drink. Mm-hmm. I remember this vividly. Oh, well, how do you get through a tough day? How do you relax after the day is over? Like I don't know. Take a walk, read a book.
Yeah.
Just turn it off. Oh, I need at least a glass of wine every day to get through. Mm-hmm. I could never imagine not. And that's usually when I hear that level of pushback, then I get kind of curious.
Yeah, me too.
About I hear that doesn't sound like great drinking. For whatever reason, I can't remember the circumstance, but I heard something like this recently, where I think it was like at soccer games, overhearing the parents talk about stuff like this, or they're kind of rolling in at an earlier soccer game, like noon, and saying, I'm still in tough shape.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I'll make a mental note here. But even in those circumstances, I don't go into lecturing them or whatever. It's their life. I'm not going to get involved. If they find out I don't drink, that's one where I just try to be the best example possible. And then if they have more questions, they'll come to me. But especially like the soccer, whatever it is, that clique of parents, there is quite a bit of drinking going on.
Yeah, if somebody comes to me with that, like, hey, how do you get through a day, or how do you do it? To me, that opens up that line of questioning where I will probably share more. And again, depends on the situation. And most of the times I'm going to start with, something I just found like it didn't work for me. And I just found like it started giving me some trouble. Or maybe I make a joke of it, which I've done many times. And I say something like, both of my wives and my lawyer said that's probably not a good idea if I drink, right? And
that's a good one.
Right? Yeah. And that's the truth, right? Is that both of my wives did tell me that I shouldn't be drinking. And so that sometimes that will open up some communication, and I may sort of probe and see how much they want to talk about it, right? And that's what I mean. Mm-hmm. So I may probe it a little bit, put some information. So if they want to continue with that, then we could talk about it. And if they say, did you go for help or just something like that, that means like that's where the person may be sort of thinking about their own drinking, right? So that's where I may open up about it and say, yeah, I needed help. Matter of fact, I still go to it. And again, this is where I can get in trouble and start oversharing and start trying to explain the fact that drinking's not my problem. Alcoholic thinking is my problem, which is way too much for the average person to understand, right? Like, it's easy for the average person to understand, hey, I drink too much. I can't control it. It's problematic for me. But when you start thinking the real problem is my alcoholic thinking, and it's that leads to my poor drinking habits, that becomes way too complicated for the average person to understand. And that's where we can get into this area of oversharing, doing the TED Talk, and sort of losing people on it. Because the most part, people are going to say, "Oh, that's not me. I don't have that problem." Because that's what I said. Oh, I only have a drinking problem, right? I came into the room, so I'm like, "Oh, I drink too much. I get it. I drink too much. I can't drink." Yeah, I get that. It wasn't until years later, which I've talked about many times on this podcast, that I really figured out the problem was not my drinking, it was my thinking, and that led me to the drinking problem. So, again, so I will open up at times, and then I will probe a little bit. And again, I'm much better at it now that I've got some, that I'm older and I have some, sobriety under my belt. But just because I'm older doesn't mean anything. But it really is because I have some sobriety under my belt. Because, I didn't get this program until I was older. Like, really get this program and really understand what my problem was until I was a much older person.
I'm going to say things that I'm really bad at, but I'm able to see it in other people. You got it when you were ready to get it. Mm-hmm. And most people don't ever get it.
Yeah, I agree.
So even if you're older and you get it, that's a victory. And there are going to be times you overshare or get excited, because especially when you first get sober, you get really excited about it, and you're ready to diagnose everyone.
Yeah.
So it's also okay to be forgiving of yourself if you do it in a socially awkward way. That is how you learn from things of what to do and what not to do. And if you do it in an awkward way, it's okay. Everybody does it. Everybody makes these type of mistakes. If we didn't, we would not be human. Some other things that are worth not doing. Don't shame someone unless they're really, really obnoxious. And then even then, there are other ways of addressing it. Mm-hmm. But think about if somebody shamed you for your drinking, would that have been helpful or would that have been hurtful? I think it was not going. You don't want people to get defensive. You don't want to lie in a way that boxes you out. Oh, I'm on antibiotics.
Right.
All right. Well, what are you going to come up with 2 weeks after that? And I've heard that a lot of like, I'm on antibiotics. I'm on meds. Especially when that's not true. I don't know. Stay away from the lies. And that's a common one. I think everybody has done it in some way because they don't know what to say. Because the other issue here is, and this is why we're talking about it, it's awkward for you as the person who's sober. Mm-hmm. And you don't know what to say because you're so afraid that somebody is going to judge you. That's what I'm afraid of. I don't want you to judge me, so I'm going to think of something that is easier to say, but avoid that one. When in doubt, it's just like, no, thank you.
Yeah, I shared, I'm sure, I just remember sharing a few weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago, who knows how long ago. But I shared about a time, this exact thing happened, right? I was working, I went out to a Yankee game with a customer who had gotten real good tickets and had invited another customer, like a different guy who I didn't know, like customer to him. These are his customers. And we got there, right? And the other guy shows up and like, hey, let's go grab a drink. And he was like, he had gotten in, like he had finished work. He had traveled to Yankee Stadium. Like, I get it, right? Let's go grab a drink.
Right.
And we're not going for a beer. We're going to the alcohol line, right? And he's like, hey, what can I get you? And I remember like feeling this was early in my coming back, very, very early. And I was really uncomfortable and I did not know what to say. Mm-hmm. And I used exactly one of those. And again, this is one of those situations where I was probably never going to see this guy again. I could say whatever I want. And I said, no, I think I said, I'm not drinking. I don't drink. I'm not drinking. And he said, why not? And I said, health reasons or whatever, right? And it just felt awkward, and the look on his face made it awkward. And that whole thing, I just didn't feel, it felt awkward. Mm-hmm. So my point is, yeah, we all do that at times. We get uncomfortable. We may say something like that. And it's okay for a one out. Yeah, I'm taking, like this guy could have told him, yeah, I'm taking some meds and I can't do it right now. But again, that was probably 13, 14 years ago. I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, something like that. The world has changed so much
Oh, yeah.
So much with in regards to alcohol that it's okay just to say, I don't drink because I don't like to drink, right? I don't drink because it's not good for me and whatever. So it's really easy and acceptable now, because I think everybody, even if you're drinkers, everybody knows people who don't drink. Not that are alcoholics and don't drink, who just don't drink. And so I think it's become so much easier if you're out there and if you struggle with this, just to say I don't drink. And again, not everybody needs an explanation as why you don't drink. Right? I mean, it all depends on the situation, who they are, what type of future contact you may have with this person, and how much you want to share. And then, again, for me, I always think about it, at this point in my life, I always think about it, is that, can I put myself in position to help someone if I share about my struggles with alcohol, right? So if people know about it, and again, I go back to this neighbor down the street who seems to drink a lot, like if this person knows, and I never told him that I was in recovery, I never told him that I was, anything like that, but if I told him that, would he ever approach me if he thought he had a problem? Maybe he sort of figured it out, and maybe he would ask me in the future if he did. I don't know. So I think about that. The other thing I do want to say is something that we have to be very careful with, and this is in our literature in the big book. It's all over. We don't want to vilify drinking, and I'm pretty good with that, right? I'm pretty good. And it's interesting because Friday night at my men's meeting, we were talking about alcohol advertisements and stuff like that. And a lot of people, I was surprised, a lot of people around this room, and this is a room with pretty good sobriety, we're talking about how, oh my God, I can't believe they're pushing this poison and all this kind of stuff. And, the advertisement, the media, everybody's young and good looking, and all that's true. But I'm like, isn't that vilifying the drinking? Like,
yep.
Isn't that what we're not supposed to do? And I don't do that, right? I mean it. I don't do it at all. Even with people who drink too much, like I don't vilify it. Like I drank too much. And I also think, like, I know a lot of things. Both my kids drink very responsibly, right? like they could go have a couple drinks and they're fine. So why am I going to vilify that when they could go out with their friends, have a drink or two, and be fine with it? And they don't drink and drive. They don't drink to excess. I've never seen my kids anywhere close to being affected by alcohol, like being buzzed. Like they may be, like I've never even seen them like that. And my kids are in their early 30s, and even my wife's kids, who are a bit older, even they'll come in and they'll drink some, and even them. And I know they will on occasion go out and or in the past they had. But so anyway, so I don't vilify it. I don't judge people, and I don't judge people on their drinking anymore because I don't want to be judged. I didn't want to be judged, and I knew inside of me there was so much more to me than people saw when I was drunk and not in a good shape, right? And there's a little bit of regret and shame over that, but so I try not to place that on other people too.
Yeah, I think that's. Yeah, you're not going to be helpful by vilifying it, especially when it's going to be. I'm thinking through the Rosetta Stone for our conversation today is how are you going to make this a positive for other people, that if they have a problem, you are a good example. And do you want to behave in a way that pushes people away? That's not a good thing. So I would say this. Key points. Keep it simple. Simple answers. You control what you share. It gets easier when you practice. And then here's the big thing. People don't care about anything more than themselves generally.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. We'd always love to hear from you. I didn't get to emails that I went through this week, but I read the emails and responded to them. We've got some good stuff. Some people who've got some sobriety, some people who don't have a lot of sobriety reaching out. Matt at soberfriendspod.com. Steve, have a great rest of your weekend.
Thanks, Matt.
We'll see everybody next week. Bye, everybody.